We're unpacking the fascinating ideas from a book called The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. Now, what makes this specific material so engaging is how it's structured. It's actually framed as this fiery, intense debate between a deeply cynical young man and a wise philosopher. So if you have ever felt stuck in a rut, weighed down by the heavy expectations of other people, or just kind of trapped by your own history, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get right into it. I want you to just sit with this thought for a second. What if the absolute biggest prison in your life isn't other people, but your own thinking? It's a heavy thought, right? But the core premise we're exploring today is that true freedom is ultimately an internal choice. It's not about suddenly changing your circumstances, landing a brand new job, or packing up and moving to a new city. It's actually about a radical shift in how you perceive yourself and your own agency in the world. The young man in the book struggles with this exact concept, just like so many of us do when we get completely overwhelmed by the complexities of modern life. So, Section 1, Escaping the Past. This first major paradigm shift really challenges a deeply ingrained belief that practically all of us hold. We so often view our lives through a highly deterministic lens. This traditional idea that your childhood experiences or your past traumas permanently dictate exactly who you're going to become in the future. And let's be honest, it's a really convenient, albeit kind of depressing, way to look at the world. But Adlerian psychology completely flips this on its head. It argues that we choose our response right now. You are absolutely not a prisoner of your past. Whatever happened to you does not permanently define your future. Why? Because from this exact moment forward, you have the power to choose an entirely different response to your circumstances. And this brings us to the very foundation of Adlerian autonomy. You have the total freedom to choose your response to life right now, because your trauma doesn't permanently define you. But, and this is a big but, there is a catch. Courage to change is absolutely required. Breaking free from those past limitations isn't about just ignoring what happened to you. It's about finding the courage to make a different choice today despite what happened. Just think about a time you held onto a grudge or maybe a paralyzing fear of failure because of some past mistake. Letting that go, it's terrifying. It demands real bravery. All right, moving into Section 2, the approval trap. Let's look at why so many of us readily sacrifice our personal freedom just for the sake of recognition. We have all asked ourselves this question at some point, right? How can I make everyone like me? And man, it is an absolutely exhausting internal monologue to keep up with. We perfectly curate our social media feeds, we bite our tongues at work just so we don't ruffle any feathers, and we live in constant fear of criticism. But in that process, we completely lose our own personal identity. The source material here is abundantly clear. Seeking constant approval and letting the fear of criticism control your decisions is a guaranteed recipe for unhappiness. You literally end up living someone else's life entirely. So the crucial shift here is to stop and ask yourself a fundamentally different question. Am I living according to my own principles? This is a massive, incredibly liberating philosophical reframe. True freedom actually begins the moment you stop living to satisfy everyone else's expectations and start living according to your own inner values. It shifts your focus entirely away from constantly seeking societal validation and allows you to finally maintain your own personal integrity. When the youth in the book finally grasps this, it completely shatters his entire worldview. But wait, what about those moments when we genuinely feel like we just aren't good enough? Well, the authors explain that feeling inferior isn't inherently something you need to fear. Healthy inferiority is when feeling inadequate actually motivates you to grow, to learn, and to improve. But it morphs into a destructive trap, an inferiority complex, when you use those feelings of inadequacy as an excuse to avoid acting with courage. It's the stark difference between saying, hey, I'm not good at this yet, so I'm going to practice, versus throwing your hands up in the air and saying, I'm not good at this, so I'll just never try. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, Separation of Tasks. This is arguably the most highly practical framework in the entire book, and it is designed specifically to help you reclaim autonomy and peace in all your relationships. Let's define this concept because it is absolutely crucial. The separation of tasks is the practice of clearly distinguishing between what is our responsibility and what belongs to others. The source material points out that worrying about other people's opinions, their emotions, or their decisions only creates unnecessary suffering for us. Why? Because we literally cannot control them. When we try to manage other people's feelings, we end up taking on these heavy burdens that were never ours to carry in the first place. And that just leads to immense daily anxiety. We have to learn to draw a line in the sand. Think about your day-to-day life for a second. Your actions, your choices, your values, that is entirely your domain. Those are your tasks. Conversely, other people's opinions, their emotions, and their decisions belong strictly to them. You can't control them. If someone dislikes your choices, well, that is their task to deal with, not yours. By focusing your energy exclusively on your own actions and choices, you drastically reduce your anxiety and completely free yourself from that endless, exhausting burden of managing everyone else's feelings. So, now that we've broken free from the past and separated our tasks, let's dive into Section 4, Finding True Happiness, and redefining what a successful, fulfilled life actually looks like. The philosopher in our story emphasizes that genuinely healthy relationships are built on 4 foundational steps: equality, respect, trust, and cooperation. Just think about how often relationships are actually based on trying to control a romantic partner or constantly competing with a coworker just to get the boss's favor. By actively choosing these 4 positive principles instead, we create an environment where we can actually accept our current strengths and weaknesses without any self-hatred. We build communities based on mutual support rather than relentless, draining power struggles. Now, obviously, this requires a massive shift in mindset. Society constantly tells us that happiness comes from superiority and competition, climbing to the absolute top of the corporate ladder and beating everyone else out. But Adlerian psychology argues that genuine fulfillment actually comes from contribution and usefulness. It doesn't come from defeating people, it comes from making a meaningful impact. Whether that's through helping others, doing meaningful work, or just being a fiercely supportive friend, you experience true happiness when you feel useful to your community rather than superior to it. The authors also stress a really vital point here. Life is a series of moments, not a destination. Think of it more like a dance than a train ride. It is so incredibly easy to fall into the trap of postponing your happiness until you reach the supposed end of the track. We always think, oh, I'll be happy when I finally get that promotion, or I'll be happy when I find the perfect partner. But postponing your happiness until some future achievement is unlocked prevents you from appreciating the dance you're doing right now. True self-acceptance means living fully and deeply in the here and now. Which brings us to our final, pretty provocative question: will you choose the courage to be disliked? Lasting happiness is fundamentally an internal choice. It is not something granted to you by society or the people around you. By letting go of the desperate need for approval, accepting absolute responsibility for your own life, contributing to others, and embracing courage over fear, you can live with incredible freedom and purpose. The only question left is, are you brave enough to take that first step? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope these insights help you build a life of genuine autonomy.